tonight's sustainability meeting. It's Monday, March 4th. And is there anyone who wishes to address us in public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from February 4th. I'm sure you've all found a chance to review those.
Several times.
Several times, of course. And did you find anything in any of those times?
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes as written? Aye. Okay. Well, just like that, Casey, we're all the way down to number 4. See how efficient we are here? Tonight, we're happy to have somebody from the Wisconsin Conservation Voters who's going to be sharing a little bit about their lobby day with us. And this is something that impacts us because it's clean air and clean water, and we stand for those things. So, Casey, please feel free to come up to the microphone. I will have to ask you to just give us your name, please, and let her rip.
Yeah, do you need like my address for the record too, or anything?
And Stephen, if he's a presenter?
I
I don't think so.
think
Okay.
so. No, if you're...
We know where to find you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, my name is Casey Hicks. I'm the Northeast organizer with Wisconsin Conservation Voters, and just taking some minutes out of your meeting today, basically to talk about our Conservation Lobby Day that we're hosting on Wednesday, March 27th, down in Madison. It's the state's largest environmental lobby day where we invite hundreds of Wisconsinites down to the Capitol to meet face-to-face with their legislators and talk about a whole host of conservation issues. So I'll talk about that along with all the issues that we're going to be talking to legislators about this year. But I know that Wisconsin Conservation Voters and our partner organization, Wisconsin Conservation Voices, is probably a new organization to a lot of people in the room and probably people who are watching through the broadcast. So I'll talk a bit about what we do, and also a little bit about the budget that just came out on Thursday, which we're really excited about. So we're dedicated to protecting Wisconsin's environment, and we do that by engaging voters to basically urge their legislators to vote on good environmental policy, stop bad environmental policy and bills going through, and hold them accountable for their votes and actions. We're nonpartisan, so we work with legislators and activists and volunteers on both sides of the aisle to basically create a conservation majority in the state legislature. And that way we're working to hold together our environmental heritage as a state. And our work extends beyond just the Capitol and the state legislature. We work on bigger bills in the legislature, but at the same time, we also work with local governments and smaller communities as well. And we really try to engage voters at every single level of government to hold their legislators accountable, or their county board supervisors or town councilmen, and make sure that they really are promoting good environmental policy and fighting against any bad policy. And beyond holding legislators accountable, we're not just trying to point fingers or wag our fingers at folks. We're also trying to empower people and make sure that not only people in local government, but activists and just regular citizens have the means and resources to actually act on their values and make sure that they're doing their part to protect our environment. And we've been able to do that through the past, like I said before, promoting big state-level policy like the Leading on Lead bill a couple years back that went towards providing low-interest loans to people who want to remove lead piping leading from the streets to their house. That can be pretty expensive and costly to try to replace. All the way down to helping counties like Marathon County and other smaller municipalities pass anti-mining ordinances once the Prove It First law was repealed not too long ago as well. All the way to where I'm based in the city of Green Bay, working with activists and people on the city council to pass a citizen-led sustainability commission that's very much still a baby commission compared to your sustainability board. And work with them to try to get that passed along with good ordinances and resolutions and initiatives at the local level. And then just generally throughout all of our work, we try to educate folks on different conservation issues in their local community and at the state level. And this year, we're really excited for our Conservation Lobby Day coming up. I'm not going to lie, the last 8 years or so have been more difficult for conservation and the environment. And we've had to dodge and stop a lot of bad bills in the state legislature. So we're kind of excited to be more of the bearers of good news now that this administration's putting a little bit more time and effort and focus on conservation issues. We've watched as wetland protections have been repealed, along with, as I mentioned before, repealing of the Prove It First mining law, opening up the door to open pit sulfide mines and a lot of other harmful environmental practices. And we've also seen climate change ignored at the state level for a really long time. All things that just really haven't been a priority up until now that we've had this new budget come out. And we've also had some monumental wins in the past. It's not to say that it's all been bad. Like I mentioned before, we were able to work with legislators on both sides of the aisle to pass that leading on lead bill to help folks out removing lead piping. But we were also able to help and make sure that NR 151 passed, which is a DNR agency ruling to actually limit the spreading of manure over geologically sensitive areas and after heavy rain events to help prevent manure contamination. So that kind of touches on a lot of the big issues that we're working on this year. Everything from protecting drinking water and making sure that folks have access to good quality water to protecting public lands and urging legislators and smaller communities to invest in renewable energy. And this year, specifically with clean drinking water, it's a very big priority and it's finally getting a lot of attention. You've probably seen that Speaker Robin Vos just created a task force to tackle that after we've seen the southwestern part of the state have 42% of wells test positive for coliform bacteria and nitrates, which can lead, nitrates specifically, which can lead to blue baby syndrome and unfortunately sudden infant death syndrome as well, which is a very terrible thing. And we've put a lot of focus as well on manure contamination. I always start off with telling the story of Erica Balza, who lives in Kewaunee County. She's not far from a large farm, and one day, the farmer next to her spread liquid manure out onto his field. He's got to do what he's got to do, obviously, to make a living. But unfortunately, there was a large rain event that night. And when Erica woke up the next day to actually, go brush her teeth and get ready in the morning, she turned on her faucet and nothing but brown, stinking, pure manure basically came out of her faucet. So she turned on her shower, same thing. She actually ran her dishwasher overnight, and I think this is the worst part. It was a brand new dishwasher, and she ran it, and of course it ran the manure water through, and she had to get a new dishwasher along with new dishes. So it's not just Erica's story. It's a lot of people who are dealing with this issue. 1/3 of wells in Kewaunee County that have tested positive for coliform bacteria, which is an indicator of other types of bacteria and viruses that might be in the water, other contaminants. So as of June of 2018, actually 75 families have still had to basically travel across the county to Algoma High School to just get water at a clean water kiosk. So it's a very large and acute issue, and it stems from large factory farms spreading manure multiple times onto the same field. It stems from just the natural geology of the area. It's very thin topsoil there with very porous bedrock. So when you do have a big rain event and there's manure on a field, it's going to seep through that topsoil pretty easily and sift through bedrock into the groundwater and eventually into people's private wells to the point where they can't drink or or shower or clean their dishes or clothes or do much of anything with it. And as I mentioned before, we worked on passing NR 151. That's a good first step towards this. We are going to be talking to legislators about doing more this year than just that. There's a whole host of issues across Wisconsin. 100,000 people rely on private wells, and they have their own unique issues when it comes to water contamination in the Southwest, as I mentioned before. They have their own issues with nitrates specifically, as well as waste issues from manure. But in the central part of the state, there are issues with high-capacity wells sucking up a lot of water from waterways and groundwater as well, leaving a lot of people short on that. So there's a lot to do on that front. And I'll talk a little bit about the budget in a moment and like what that gets towards that. But clean energy is another big issue we're talking about this year to legislators. It's one that we can't ignore anymore. If you've seen I'm sure you've all seen the UN and EPA reports that basically say we only have about 1.5 degrees Celsius of leeway before there are irreversible changes and effects that are going to happen to our environment, and only about a decade to really make unprecedented change that really hasn't happened. So we need to obviously be making a big push for that at the local level and at the state level. We've already seen utilities starting to make the jump to clean energy. Alliance is promising to cut emissions by 80% by 2050 from 2005 levels, along with Xcel Energy already promising to make sure that they're 100% renewable by 2050 and carbon-free. Solar and wind are, of course, becoming cheaper, much cheaper than coal, and our economy stands to benefit a lot from making the push towards renewables and becoming energy independent. So $14.4 billion is how much we spend on bringing in coal and dirty forms of energy, and we stand to actually create 160,000 jobs from making the push towards renewable energy. So municipalities like yourselves are already making a lot of efforts towards sustainable initiatives, whether it's ordinances or resolutions or commissions. There's a lot of folks who are making the push, and now it's the state's turn. And again, that's another huge issue that we're going to be talking about at our lobby day. And then the last big issue that we're talking about to legislators is public lands, and just how important they are to our overall economy, and how important they are to our environments. The Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program specifically is going to be a talking point for us. It's a bipartisan program that was started in 1989, and it provides grants and funding to local governments to acquire public land and maintain it and protect it for either recreational use or to promote wildlife habitat, protect ecologically sensitive areas. It's very important. And there's a lot of areas actually that you're probably familiar with that were paid for with stewardship program funds, like the Fox River Trail in Green Bay. My favorite county park in Brown County, Fawn Ferret Glen, if you've ever been there, which is a really great one. Also, I had to look this one up, by the way. There's a fun map you can look at if you ever want to see what lands have been paid for by this. But just need to check. It's not far from here. Sawyer Creek Trail and the Nature Preserve were paid for in part by the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program. So a lot of notable places. Since its creation, 71 out of 72 counties in Wisconsin have bought up to 500,000 acres in public lands to basically turn over for people to enjoy or to protect ecologically sensitive areas. And our economy really benefits from outdoor recreation. That industry alone generates $18 billion a year for Wisconsin. And a separate $4 billion comes just from hunting and fishing from those two industries. So this is really important, and unfortunately, over the last few years, the stewardship program has really been cut at and slashed. Prior to 2009, it was funded at $86 million a year, which is actually well above full funding for it. And periodically over the last 8 years, it's been cut at. And today it's only $33.5 million. So that's a lot of money that's just sitting on the table, or money that could be going towards local governments to purchase up public land and basically contribute to their economy and public health too by having people get outside. So there's a lot to talk about at our lobby day that we have on March 27th. And we're really excited about the budget that Governor Tony Evers just released. It's a good base to build off of. However, it's not perfect, of course. Nothing ever is. But it's a good start for clean water by pledging $70 million towards addressing non-point source runoff. And this is where I'm going to have to look down in my paper because there's a lot of stuff, and it just came out on Thursday, so I don't have it all memorized yet. Providing low interest forgivable loans up to 50% of the cost for removing lead pipes, so building off of that leading on lead bill, along with giving funds to support removing contaminated sediment from the Great Lakes and their tributaries, $425,000 towards overseeing and holding KFILs accountable for well contamination. Just another statistic, nonpartisan audit found that 95% of the time water pollution rules are going unenforced. So that would really get at this issue as well. And a lot more things related to protecting Wisconsin's water. In terms of renewable energy, this new budget is doing a lot as well. We've already seen that the state of Wisconsin just joined the U.S. Climate Alliance, which is really exciting to join about 30 other states in the country and doing our part to stave off climate change. And it's also going to make sure to include $75 million in bonding for energy conservation projects, of which $25 million is specifically going to be going towards state facilities to update towards more sustainable infrastructure and renewables. It's going to be creating an Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy to make sure that we're putting money into research, specifically $4 million worth of grants towards renewable energy research and sustainable research, as well as taking the $25 million settlement that's coming from Volkswagen for the fraudulent emissions control equipment that happened not too long ago, taking some of that money and breaking it up to pay for replacing public transit, for better vehicles that have less of a carbon footprint, as well as creating a grant program to give to local governments to create electric vehicle charging stations. So all exciting things on that front. As I said, everything's not perfect in the budget, and one of the things that we really want to make a push for at our lobby day is on the issue of public lands. While the budget is going to be allocating a lot of money towards state parks, $2.8 million in the next biennium for them, it doesn't do the Knowles-Nelson Stewardship Program a whole lot of justice as of yet. The budget falls flat on that part, partly because the funding for the program, what it should be, is $70 million to fully fund it, and it should be fully reauthorized for at least a decade, as it has been in the past. But instead, it's been a little bit lower of a priority, it seems like, in this budget, and it's only being extended to 2021 to the 2022 budget. So we're just kind of kicking the can down the road on that, as well as it's just keeping it at its current funding levels, which is, again, $33.5 million, which is pretty anemic for where it should be. Local governments really rely on it to create things like trails, parks, wildlife habitat, all those really great public land opportunities I mentioned earlier. So I already mentioned some of the great parts of it that have funded different areas here, but there's a lot of holes that need to still be filled with it, and that's going to be a big issue talking to legislators. So at our Conservation Lobby Day, those are the issues we're talking about. we've got our base with the budget. There's still more to do. It's not perfect. We also know that this budget is more than likely going to be thrown out, certain parts of it, and rewritten by the legislature. But that creates an opportunity for us to talk to legislators and let them know which parts of this budget are really important. So, that's going to be protecting drinking water. It's going to be investing and protecting in public lands, and it's going to be making the transition to clean energy. And our lobby day is a chance for constituents to go down to Madison, meet with their legislators face to face. It's completely free in terms of the day itself, along with a free lunch and also free transportation down there. We've got a bus that's stopping here in Oshkosh to pick folks up and bring them down to Madison. And if folks are a little concerned about going to a lobby meeting, it kind of sounds intimidating to meet with your state representative or your state senator. Maybe they have never really been receptive to things in the past, or you're just kind of nervous in general because you think they're super cool and you're just kind of scared to meet them in person. People find it really rewarding, no matter what kind of legislator they have, to meet with them, tell their story. We train you during that day too on the issues, and then we also train you on how to effectively tell your story, how to effectively lobby your legislator and get them to try to act on these issues and hold them accountable. And not only that, but between meetings, we actually have keynotes throughout the day and different workshops. Everything from talking about fair maps to local clean energy, having speakers on environmental justice issues this year. A lot of really great things. And it's a really good chance for you to go down Madison, fight for your values, talk to your legislators, get to spend time with like-minded people who have the same values as you and network a bit as well. And again, it's on Wednesday, March 27th. Registration's at 9 a.m. at Monona Terrace in Madison. The day itself starts at 10 a.m. You want to get there before, though, to register. And folks who are watching over the live link can sign up through our website by going to conservationvoters.org and navigating to our events page. And you can RSVP there. And then after you've signed up, you'll actually get a link in the form saying that you can sign up for the bus as well, so you can diminish your carbon footprints. So I'd urge all of you to join us down there that day. It's going to be really fun. It always is. We in the past have had 350 people there. We've had 400 people there. This year we're shooting for 500. We really want to get a lot of folks down there. This is a big year, and we really need to show legislators what our priorities are. So I ask you to join us down in Madison and help us to protect our environments. I can also answer any questions that you guys have too.
Does anyone have any questions for him? That was pretty complete, Casey. I can't imagine we
Thanks.
have more. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yes. Thank you for sharing. Okay, woo. Next on the agenda is our urban beekeeping and chicken keeping ordinances. There was about 100 pages worth of no, it wasn't quite. It just felt like 100 pages. You want to kind of talk us through this, Stephen, a little bit?
Sure.
So just breaking into it, Steve, is this a update of what we previously did last year in early spring with the beekeeping? What's
Yes.
different about what we read?
So basically what I did is I worked with our attorney on basically revising both ordinances.
Okay.
So, I as a staff person, you all as the board, we kind of talked about the ordinances way back last spring. I can't remember if it was like April or May, a while back. And then after that, I went through several rounds of edits, and, I did a lot of research, tried to look at other ordinances out there from other communities. And then I tried to bring ours in line. We tried to bring ours in line, I should say, because it wasn't just me. Our attorneys and myself, we tried to bring our ordinances in line with some of the other communities in the state. We looked at like Eau Claire, we looked at La Crosse, Appleton. There were a few others, Wausau, I think even. there's a lot of communities that have different ordinances. Some are probably more restrictive, some are more permissive, some don't address everything we address, and then there's some that address things to a greater degree. So we tried to kind of find a happy medium, but all the while bringing these in line with what we saw for some of the research and some of the ordinances out there. So I guess I can go through some of these, some of the edits here. It was hard to put it into the packets, and I apologize if it was confusing. Ideally, we would have had like a marked up draft, and then you would have had the original, and we could have compared them. But the problem is that we had so many markups that we then accepted, and then certain drafts had certain markups, and then other drafts didn't have those, and it just became really complex. So what I did was I just put the cleaned up version in there. But really, what we did was we tried, one, to consolidate the ordinances into a section on chicken keeping and a section on beekeeping, because the chicken keeping section before was kind of all over the ordinance. There was some like animal cruelty section that had some chicken provisions in it, and then there were some chicken provisions in other sections. And so we tried to make it a little bit more intuitive and easier to access and understand. I know it seems like there's a lot of other provisions in here, but we'll go through some of it. We tried to expand on the definitions here. So, we tried to address some of the terms that you would see in the ordinances. I know in chicken keeping, I think I tried to model some of this after the beekeeping ordinance. I believe some of these were in the old ordinance, and we tried to expand on these a little bit here. What we did was then we went into the standards of practice, and I kind of expanded on these a little bit based on some of the ordinances that we saw in our research. So it may seem from first look that there's more stuff here and that they're more restrictive. In a sense, it may seem that way, but at the same time, what we also compensated by doing was we eliminated the consent requirement for the adjacent property owners. That was something that was a real hang-up for people trying to obtain permits for chicken keeping in the past. What we do have in here is we do have some more standards of practice, though, that we are asking that chicken keepers, people trying to own and keep chickens on their property, will adhere to. A lot of these are pretty straightforward. They deal with locating the chicken enclosure, where we can put it on the property, making sure that it's not going to affect the neighbors, any more than it needs to. I think if the ordinance is adhered to, it shouldn't be an issue. A lot of this deals with like sanitation, stuff that, if you're keeping hens on the property, that you're going to keep stuff clean, that stuff that you would think would be pretty straightforward, but we try to expand on that in the ordinance so that it's crystal clear. If there's any unusual health issues or illness, death of chickens, that would be reported to the health department. Hopefully I don't see that being an issue, but I know some of the ordinances did get into that. We want there to be at least some direction in the ordinance for stuff like that. Trying to think here. So there's a few prohibitions here that are in the ordinances. So for example, here, we would allow chicken keeping as it is currently, and I believe it would just stay the same. We would only allow it on lots containing single and two-family residential uses. The problem with multiple family uses is that all sorts of people have access to those common areas. So if someone puts up a coop, then what happens? If somebody else wants access to that area, there's some other issues that could come up, and we just felt like if we keep it to single and two family for now, we'll see how it goes, and we can always tweak the ordinances down the road if council is supportive of that. We did put an appeals provision in here in case somebody's denied a permit. So before, we didn't have that in the ordinance. And in here, we do, if the director of community development, or in our case, planning services staff is the designee, if any of us deny somebody a permit, we make a staff decision to deny the permit, they can appeal it to the Board of Appeals, I believe. And they have a process outlined in here by which a resident can do that. And then there's a whole section on revoking of permits if somebody is not following the ordinance, or if they're raising chickens without a permit, or if there's been issues in the past. That's kind of what we got into with the chicken ordinance. So, you'll see, like I said, more standards of practice, but then we did kind of relax we tried to streamline the whole process of actually obtaining a permit. So that's the chicken ordinance there. The beekeeping ordinance, a lot of this is pretty similar to before. There are a few more definitions in here. We tried to use the same terminology for both when it was applicable in both ordinances. And then what we did was we did some research. We looked at some of the other ordinances for bees also. And we expanded a little bit on the standards of practice. One thing that came up was the flyway barrier. A number of ordinances have exemptions for the flyway barrier. So we initially have required it for any time you want to keep bees. You have to have a flyway barrier around the beehive. And what we found was that some of the ordinances out there only require the barrier if your hive is located within 25 feet of an adjacent lot. Then it's really fulfilling a purpose of trying to direct those bees up rather than perhaps into the faces of neighbors or somebody else. So if someone was to locate their beehive within 25 feet of a lot line, this barrier would still be required. If not, or if the property adjacent to the lot is undeveloped, perhaps, then there's provision in here that does not require that barrier. That came up with a few permits, a few beekeepers. The other thing that that in our research we looked at was we were pretty prescriptive with the size of a hive in terms of its dimensions. I think it was a 24 by 24 by 36 inch hive maximum. What some beekeepers asked me to look at and what I found in some of the research was that a lot of ordinances of other communities have a maximum volume requirement. And I believe that that is supposed to be more hospitable for top bar hives that are supposed to be better for the bees. That's what I was told and what I found in the research. So what we did was we changed the size requirement and we looked at volume, 15 cubic feet versus a 24 by 24 by 36. Because, if you had two hives, you might have the same area that you would have here. But you'd be excluded from having certain types of hives otherwise. I think we're really concerned with the volume. If you only have so much volume, you can only have so many bees anyway. So that was a big thing. Like I said, got into some of the exemptions with the flyway barriers. And there's, I'm trying to think here, a few things where we clarified, like, okay, you cannot keep bees or chickens for that matter on a vacant lot. It's pretty standard in the city that we don't allow other types of things on vacant lots. So for example, you can't just keep a garage on a vacant lot and keep storing stuff in it. If there's no principal structure or house on the lot, the garage is supposed to come down, or a principal structure has to be reestablished on the lot. It's kind of the same idea with these ordinances. You can't just be storing stuff on a lot. You can't be keeping your bees or chickens on the vacant lot, stuff like that. And then lastly, getting into the appeals for if you're denied again. This is same language as the chicken ordinance. And then revoking of permits, the same process. So there are mechanisms in there in case somebody is denied a permit. If anybody wants to complain, a neighboring property owner, they can complain to staff. What we as staff would do is we would go through the enforcement process. We'd go out there, we'd take a look, are chickens being raised, improperly or kept without a permit in violation of the ordinance, because that is the number one issue that we found with chickens, is people are keeping them not in accordance with the ordinance. Same thing with bees. So we as staff would take appropriate enforcement rather than having veto power for the neighbors, and then, people's hands are pretty much tied then at that point. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what we did with these ordinances. And then we just revised the flyway barrier diagram to make sure that it was consistent with the text, because before there was some stuff that was inconsistent, and then that creates issues and confusion when we're going through the permitting process.
Very impressive.
Yes.
Did this meet the concerns? We had a citizen coming about changing the beekeeping, and does this meet all his concerns? Or?
I believe it does. And of course, we do have to weigh everybody's to the best of our ability.
Right,
So
but-
yes, we tried to do that. We tried to meet the concerns of folks that perhaps have reservations about neighbors raising chickens and bees. We tried to have reasonable regulations here that are in line with everybody else. And like I said, there's a mechanism in here if there are issues for us to address those. But yep,
I have a question on B's under standards of practice. Did we eliminate J? Am I reading that correctly, the unused equipment part? Or,
actually, no, that is a new section, and some of the track changes in Word, I didn't get, this lettering was something else, but
so everything that's here is part of it? It's not like that was taken out?
yes, if it was
Okay.
taken out, I would have had it struck through.
Okay.
And then I probably would have just eliminated it, but that section is a new section, and that was in some of the other ordinances, or some variation of that was in there. Basically, making sure that you're looking after your unused equipment, not allowing it to attract swarms, stuff like that. Not allowing it to become a nuisance.
Okay, so you're really more concerned, though, about, with that paragraph about protecting it from bees taking occupancy than somebody stealing your equipment,
Yes,
because that would just be dumb.
yep.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions on parts of this, or had you managed to work your way through it yet?
I just have one kind of picky question. So on, I don't know, page 7, under the definitions for urban beekeeping, it references African honeybee.
Yeah.
But then on page 9, under prohibitions, they're called Africanized honeybees, as if they were here and then went to Africa to be Africanized.
Oh, so
Weird
This one right here.
keeping it consistent,
wording.
yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, one of those really picky.
No, that's
little
fine.
things.
That's a good point, though, because we want it to be consistent in there. So
Yeah.
I'll just address that and try to look at
Okay.
that.
Cool, that was all I had.
Sure.
So why anybody would want to have Africanized honeybees anyway?
Honey's really good,
Is it really?
I promise.
Any other comments or questions?
That was the only one I had pointed out.
I believe that we are hoping that we can adopt this tonight to send, that we can agree that it should go to the council now for adoption.
That'd be ideal, just because I know it's been a long process, and I think it'd be nice if we can finish it, wrap it up. Hopefully, it'll be good to go for a while, depending on what happens at council and all that. But, yeah, it would go, we have it on the agenda as an action item, so we can take a vote on it. And then what we can do is, after that, I would work with our city attorney again on getting it ready for council, just, drafting the memo and, the report to council essentially on it. So, yep, that'd be the next step.
I have to thank you for getting, for taking care of that section for both the bees and chickens about not needing the neighbors to sign off. I think that is very smart. So, and also a lot more fair. Neighbors change, but your bees will keep coming back. Okay, would anybody be interested in making a motion to accept this to pass on to council?
One from each?
I think you do the whole chapter.
I think we can do the whole thing
Yeah,
at
right,
once.
yep.
Unless you only want one part of it to go. That's
Good question.
There'd be that, yeah.
Oh, sure. So moved. Go ahead.
Can you give me 1 second? I just want to check something.
Sure.
Just on the note of neighbors coming in and going, just pop something into my mind. For the revocation of permits procedure and complaints, do we define what, is there any definition, or do we make any distinction, like legitimate complaints versus like a new neighbor coming in and just saying, I don't want to live next to bees?
I don't think we have a distinction in here on that. I think that's something that we as staff, we would have to look at on a kind of a situational basis and see, and they could, we would investigate it if we determine it's a real issue that's going on.
Interesting. That's yeah. And are they buying the property or renting it, or did they know the bees were there? There's many, yeah, it has to be on an there's too many variables.
Yeah, that's why it's kind of, we tried to address as much as we could in the ordinance, but it's very difficult for an ordinance to address every situation. That's why for that,
Yeah, so I guess
There's-
I'm just thinking the hypothetical person,
Oh,
if somebody
definitely.
buys a house and they didn't know bees were next door, and if we don't have any, like a city database where they can check this and
Sure.
say they move in and they have a kid who's allergic to bees,
Right.
They're not gonna wanna, they're gonna have a lot of stress, probably,
Oh, yeah.
that they just closed down the house, they bought it, and they didn't know the bees were there. So will there be a city database where people would actually be able to check this?
that's a good question, and I
That'd be
can
cool.
probably follow up and see, we can have some staff discussions and see what they think too. And go from there, because, no, it's a good question.
Well, and it's also an awareness issue, because if you're buying a house, you might not know that somebody could keep
Yeah.
bees in the city, so, or chickens. No roosters, though.
Suppose if you have a kid who's allergic, that's a good thing to think, you'd be thinking about that.
It seems like
If you knew that bees were
Right.
allowed
Yeah,
in the city, yeah.
yeah, if you knew to ask the question, like so many things, if,
Right. Well,
Right.
if you just see a
If you-
flyaway barrier, who's to say that's not just a decorative fence? You know,
Right,
like, not
right.
like there's a sign that says,
Right.
"Hi, I'm a flyaway
The
barrier."
critical thing would be somebody new to town realizes that bees are allowed in the city,
Correct.
yeah,
yeah, and then they would know to ask.
yeah.
That'd be a cool idea, though, like a database. They didn't
Yeah.
know where to get eggs.
If realtors were aware enough to warn people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and maybe we need to do some public education on this, that,
Sure do.
yeah, if only we had somebody to do that. Anybody want to make a motion on this?
We have the motion, don't we?
Do
Nope.
we have a motion? Not yet.
Sorry, I
Go
apologize. I
for
cut
it.
you off. Vic.
You did totally fine. I'm just gonna go for it. I move to pass chapter 6, pending the Africanized edit, to the council for approval. I think that's all I have to say.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Then all in favor of passing this on?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Okay, that passed. Oh, our beekeeping friends and our chicken keeping friends will be so happy.
Sure will.
Okay, next on our agenda, the Environmental Leadership Award update.
Yeah, so that, I know a few of us have talked about that award and the process. We had one nomination. I talked to you, Margie, about it, Lurton, Tom Halquist from Southwest Rotary Environmental Committee. I think it sounds like they were all in support. I think all of you were in support of moving it forward. And Lurton had the suggestion that we move it forward. We don't have to have like a separate committee meeting for it, and get people together. I think,
We're all in agreement. so-
yeah. So I think we can do that. My goal, if possible, is maybe we can present it at State of the City, but I'm gonna have to see on that.
That'd be awesome.
And I
That's-
know the Rotary folks had asked that too,
Yeah.
if I could see about doing that. So I had talked to Emily downstairs, or I had emailed her. I just have to follow up with her, I think, on that.
Okay, that'd be cool.
Mm-hmm.
That is 2 weeks from tonight,
Mm-hmm. Yep, coming up
just to be clear. Okay.
on the 18th, I believe. Yep.
Yep, so we're hoping to present that on the 18th.
Mm-hmm.
And are you going to take care of creating a certificate or whatever we're going to be then, or have?
Yeah, I think I can work on that. In maybe a couple of us, or I can work with you on it, or somebody on the board or Rotary committee.
Somebody from Rotary?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Whoa, cool. We got something done, folks. All right, we have to take no further action on that until the next round, which we'll discuss a timeline and figure it out after we get this one done, right?
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. 2019 Oshkosh Farmers Market handout. Do we have any updates on that, Vic? Or
Yeah, Steven's pulling them up, so instead of wasting paper, I just emailed them to myself. The left one
So
first,
clever.
please.
Okay.
So there was one request to change, just want to scroll down so we can see like one whole, yeah, thank
Oh
you.
yeah, there.
So there was just a request to add something about rain barrels to this front page, so that was done. It's the second to last tick mark, whatever you'd like to call this. So just added, utilize a rain barrel to conserve water. That was the only real edit to the front page that anyone had for me, or the backside actually. I don't really feel like there's much else to be done with this. Kind of good to go. Steven, do you want to bring up the other one? So this would actually be technically the front side, just with, again, our name, our information, how people can get in contact with us, and then we added our Facebook handle at the bottom as well, as requested. Yeah. I do have a question, actually, more than anything else. Just how will these be printed? Who's going to pay for that?
The city.
Cool. I like that.
They have an in-house printing department, so.
Love it. Who shall I contact about getting these made? Or Stephen, is that something
You
be?
may just send them to Stephen and he'll take care of it all.
Yep.
Am I right?
Yeah, we usually
I like
do.
it.
Yep.
Cool.
That was easy.
It really was.
We need one
Yeah.
of those buttons.
I know, that would be nice. But those are the only edits that I really had. I didn't really see there's no need to make this thing super fancy, right? This is meant to just be handed out to as many people as humanly possible, so that they have basic information about us, who we are, and then a takeaway, right? That was our goal. Something they could take away from the farmer's market and have that really good fuzzy feeling. So that's what the backside is of what you can do for the environment.
I did just proofread it too. It looks perfect. Well, didn't you?
I tried.
You did good. Thank you so much for getting that taken care of.
Not a problem.
Margie, so since I have not been on the board as long as some others here, I'm not sure I can answer this question, but how many times in the last maybe 5 years have we canceled a meeting or moved to a different building or
We
did
moved
not
to
follow those
We
City
moved to
Hall
another
Room
building
404?
once.
Yes.
Exactly once. We've only canceled a meeting maybe 3 times in that amount of time, and it's always been once it was for weather related, and the other 2 times it's been for lack of quorum. So it is true but it's posted everywhere that's when the meeting is. It's not just on this. So if anybody ever really wanted to know, they could call City Hall before 4:30 to find out if we were in fact.
Okay.
And that's something we would post on the Facebook page too.
Posted someplace
True.
online, and then do they put a sign on the door or something if it's canceled, or on that screen?
Probably not.
No, I wouldn't.
I really doubt it, unless Stephen thought to do that, which I don't know if he would even be here if it's like weather related or something,
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So,
But it'd be posted online.
yeah, it would be an extreme circumstance that we wouldn't be following that. And it is our established time. We don't really have an option to change our time or date.
Yeah.
So if we're going to have the meeting, that's when it's going to be. So I think we're pretty safe.
Okay.
Feel good? All righty then. Moving on to social media discussion action. Who would like to take that one? Would you like me to deal with that?
Yeah, do you just want to do the changes and then I'll do what we can post now? No? Cool.
Go
So
ahead,
essentially,
Vic.
I've been removed as an administrator of the Facebook page. Nothing I personally did. It was just a move by the city. So it's just a little more tricky to post things. So I just have to send things over to Stephen more frequently.
So Steve's the administrator now?
Oh,
or-
Yeah,
He is the
it's now
Was
city
we,
staff.
we
for-
both
yep.
were, yes. It just has to be a staff now, correct, is my
Yep.
understanding?
That is
City
correct.
staff instead of, yep.
As I don't work for the city anymore, that can't be me. So, yeah, just a little delayed is why we haven't been posting as often. It's just something that Steve and I have to get on the, same page. Essentially, I'll just send him emails a lot. But yeah, so we're just going to kind of figure it out, see what we can do from there. But that's why we've been a little silent lately on Facebook.
Quite honestly, we're working with 2 professionals with this. Between Vic and Stephen, I think it's going to be fine. You will figure out a way to make this work, and
Yeah.
we'll continue to be able to share good information in a timely fashion.
Agreed.
The one thing that came up when we as staff met, and we'll have to just kind of figure it out, but staff, like if staff has something to post, generally, we would go and we would get approval and we would post it. If it's like meet at this place on this date, that's something we can post, whatever. If it's something that someone on the board wants us to post, I think my understanding from the staff meeting was that we as staff would hold on to it and then bring it to the next SAB meeting. We'd have the board take action and determine what to post from that list, or, that whatever items, and then we would post it after that. So that was kind of the direction I was given. I mean, I can follow up with some of the senior staff and see if any of that's changed or if my understanding was wrong, but I believe that's what I was told a few weeks back, so.
It's all very new for the entire city,
Yep.
for all the boards and commissions and whatever that has social media out there, and it is still kind of being fleshed out, I think, how it's actually going to work. So I would think that probably a month from now, we'll have a lot better idea of how that's going to be. But for now, Vic, I really feel like anything that you have prepared and, pass on to Stephen. And he's professional and is going to know if this is inappropriate content, which it never has been, so I don't see why it would be.
Shouldn't have an issue, no.
Sustainability should not be inappropriate.
Yeah, and the theme for March, I was just going to pick one of the chapters. If anyone has an idea on what chapter they'd like me to highlight first, by all means, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to pick one.
How about clean water?
Sounds great. That'll lead really well into April when we focus on rain barrels.
It would, wouldn't it? It seemed timely somehow tonight.
I like it. Cool. So then March, the focus will be on clean water. Thanks, friends.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, that takes us to agenda items for a future meeting. I will tell you that next month we do have a speaker coming in to share mucho information with us about PAHs, which is, Pat could probably tell us how you actually pronounce the whole word, but it's basically coal tar sealants in,
Probably.
what?
Polyaromatic hydrocarbon, probably.
Yeah, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, that's it. And they're bad, and they're going into our lake. So that'll be the subject of our speaker next month. So we do have that. And there was a PowerPoint in the packet. It's not going to be the same one. The speaker will be bringing their own. But we'll have that next month. Is there anything else? And I realize we have it, until we go into workshop, we don't have our action plan to deal with yet. But is there anything else that anybody would like to see on next month's agenda? Which will be on April 1st?
I believe so, yep.
April 1st, yeah, it's going to be April Fool's Day. But we're going to show up anyway?
Correct.
Yes.
I thought Michelle mentioned the Menominee Shoreland Restoration.
I believe so, because
thought
she
so.
has called a meeting for March for that group. So yes, we'll want to put that on. So Shoreland and PAHs. We're going to have water covered next month. Okay. Anything else? If you think of anything, let Stephen know, and we'll see if we can incorporate that. Otherwise, our next meeting will be on Monday, April 1st, April Fool's Day, right here in City Hall, Room 404. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn to workshop session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you, guys.